Welcome to the Change Matters Virtual Summit. My name is Margit Takacs. I'm a change management consultant, trainer, coach, and the author of the award-winning book Change Matters. I am delighted to welcome Julia Bodin, founder of the Let's Talk Waste, to the Change Matters Virtual Summit today. Julia, an environmental engineer, is a leading advocate for sustainable business practices, particularly to fight against plastic pollution and waste reduction. Her journey began with her studies on coral resilience during her master's thesis, which sparked a passion for a greener future. Founded in 2018, Let's Talk Waste has been recognized for its science-based approach to sustainability, winning the first jury prize at the Social Impact Awards Switzerland. In my Change Confident Academy, Julia shares invaluable insights on overcoming resistance, making her a valuable addition to today's virtual summit. Thank you so much, Julia, for making the time to join us.
Thank you for welcoming me and for the invitation.
I have so many questions, and I believe a lot of my listeners are also curious about how these principles of change management can be applied in the world, which is about sustainable future, a greener future. So many of us out there are committed to the mission, but I wonder if we do enough. And you've dedicated your professional career to really finding ways to really bring people on board for this. I wanted to ask you, how do you customize your engagement strategies to really attract, appeal different groups within a company? Because you work with a lot of corporations. How do you make sure the senior management and the entry-level employees are also motivated in participating in the workshops, discussions that you lead to really let's talk waste and decrease waste?
I think the answer is both I don't customize it and I do. By that is what I mean is that when it's possible, I try to invite all levels of the company to the same workshop. So that they can together really connect on the topic as a one entity, as a one company, and to have an opportunity together to discuss the development, so in with the ideas that they will co-create the sustainability strategy together. And I think it's really valuable when there is all levels of the company present during those workshops, because then they can have this really holistic view, from having the the worldview of a C-suite person versus the worldview of a person who's really working in the production lines, for example. So this is why I would say, I try not to customize it. But in some contexts, it's not possible to have all the levels of the company together on one workshop. And I've had to adjust formats for clients before, to very varying context and also constraints. And that's mainly why I customize my workshops. So, for example, I worked a lot with a luxury watch company, and in that company, everything is very timed, as you can expect. So, in a given workshop, they have so many movements they need to produce per day, per week, per month. I don't know exactly where the target is, but and so giving the time of 15 people, if that's how many they are in the workshop, for 15 minutes, that's already a lot of minutes that are wasted or that are lost and not dedicated to producing the movements or the watches that they're supposed to. And so in this context, for this client, what I have done is that I've offered a long workshop for the managers where we really went into the depth of why is plastic waste an issue? How big is that issue? What's at stake? So, what is moving from a legal point of view within Switzerland, Europe, and the world that is going to affect the company in the future in terms of plastic pollution and waste reduction? What is the company's ambitions towards that problem, and then co-creating together the next steps of the waste reduction strategy. And then I took the conclusions of that workshop and I summarized it in a 15-minute format, which was very, very short and not very interactive, but a little bit. And I went and visited every single workshop. where we discuss together, what is their strategy, how is it working for them, because it felt really important to give them a moment where they can voice concerns or obstacles, barriers that is preventing them from using the tools that are already given to them, so that they can reduce the waste production in the operations. So yeah, it's a twofold answer. When I can, I try not to customize and have all the levels of the company. And then on the other hand, when I can't, I just try to make it I try to adjust it to the constraint of the people I have in front of me mostly.
It's fascinating. And in all fairness, what I hear is that you are invited as Let's Talk Waste to come into an organization. Let's talk about how we can have a greener future, how we can commit to it. And in these workshops, you help them come up with practical things they can do to get greener, to use less waste or make less waste in their work. There is a difference between knowing what to do and doing it. And you've mentioned that you have different methods to help people bridge that gap. To move from knowing what to do to actually committing to do something for a greener future, what approaches, what methods do you use that you would recommend to the listeners?
I think there is, what I do is interesting, and there are other things I could explore. One of the tools I can think about that you've mentioned in the Change Confident Academy is the three S's. The data, the statistics, the stories, and the sponsors. What I do is that first of all, I don't assume that people know, because we are very surprised how little people know. When I talk to random people on the street, which I have had to do in a past job to try to raise funds for a environmental cause, I was really shocked by how few people know about the environmental challenges we're facing, and how even less know how they could get started. So I start by not assuming that people know what to do. I use a guided visualization to help people dive into the topic. So really to get them, in the fields, in the ocean, finding out about plastic pollution through a visualization. It's a bit of a disruptive visualization because the end is a bit abrupt, but that is the intention, so that they can remain a bit shocked by what they discovered at the end of the visualization, which is plastic waste in the ocean. And then I use games. And the games that I've created, they're very, very simple card games that anyone could have come up with. But what I find very powerful with those games is that they trigger conversation and curiosity. So the games, the first one is really about understanding the impact of littering. So what happens to waste when it's left in nature, so that people can start debating within their groups about certain materials and how impactful they are. And then we have a debrief, which is usually, for a 10-minute game, we will talk for about 45 minutes, sometimes even an hour, with a lot of questions coming up. And we will talk about the visual impact of waste. And we will talk about the other impact. So there's of course, a plastic bottle will eventually become invisible to the naked eye, but then it actually breaks down into very small particles of plastic called microplastic, and that's where it has a lot of effects. The same thing could be said about plastic butts. Cigarette butts, when they're thrown in nature, they take, there's a lot of varying data on that, but they take on average 10-15 years to degrade. But filters are plastic, so same story with the plastic. And the cigarette itself contains a lot of chemicals, around 7,000 chemicals, 700 of them being carcinogenic. And that impact is invisible, and yet it kills hundreds and thousands of animals in the aquatic environment. So we try to explore, also the other impacts that are not the ones we perceive because they're not visible. And then the second game is about recycling practices. And again, 10 minutes, very simple game, 1 hour discussion. So people can really challenge each other and therefore have questions about what they could do to properly recycle their waste, and also to come to a realization that recycling is not that perfect, that in a lot of cases you can't recycle the waste that you have in your hand. And so really to trigger that thinking, okay, so if I can't recycle all of these things, what could I do differently? So really to trigger that curiosity and that willing to learn something new. And then when the client is willing to go this far, I offer dialogue practices so that people can co-create together the either what they want to do as a private individual to go one step, two step, three step further into waste reduction journey, or what the company can do and offer in order to go the next step into waste reduction.
I think we just heard three very practical approaches, methods you use, namely visualization, which might be shocking for some, but because of that surprise element can be rather effective. You mentioned the dialogue practices and even card games to get the conversation going and trigger curiosity. Thank you so much, Julia. I believe that today's listeners would find it very valuable to see how all the principles of change, leadership, and management can be applied to topics way beyond the corporate and the organizational setting, to our personal life and to a collective life on Earth. Thank you so much for being a change advocate with Let's Talk Waste and for making the time for sharing your insights today with us.
Thank you, Margit.